The wind howled across the deserted training grounds as a column of soldiers gathered at the edge of the restricted zone, their boots grinding into the dirt. Warning signs flapped violently along the fence, each one screaming the same message: Minefield, do not enter. Then the murmurs began. Someone was walking toward it. A small figure, steady, silent, almost unreal under the rising heat haze. One of the sergeants shouted for her to stop, but she didn't even flinch. She placed one foot inside the marked boundary, and every soldier instinctively reached for cover. The ground was packed with explosives, the kind that needed only a whisper of pressure to light up the entire valley. Yet she moved forward, slowly, deliberately, as if she was stepping through a dream instead of a death trap. Within seconds, the arrogance on their faces melted into disbelief. Is she insane? Someone muttered. But the commander, jaw hard, eyes narrowing, leaned forward and whispered the question they all feared to ask: how is she doing that? They didn't know her name, most had never bothered to learn it. To them she was just another quiet recruit who failed to stand out in a room full of louder, stronger, more aggressive soldiers. But those who had trained alongside her felt something different, an unsettling calm that followed her like a shadow. While others stomped, she drifted. While others bragged, she observed. And while the rest relied on muscle and noise, she had mastered something far rarer: silence. The unit joked about it at first, calling her ghost, mocking the way she moved without sound. They doubted her abilities, doubted her presence, doubted the very idea that someone like her could belong in a combat unit. Yet the commander had noticed the precision in her steps, the way she studied terrain, the way she listened to the earth instead of the voices around her. When the time came to test every soldier's control, discipline, and nerve, the brass selected a challenge so unforgiving that even elite operators hesitated. The abandoned minefield, long decommissioned from active drills because too many soldiers panicked halfway through, was reopened for a single purpose: to expose weakness. The moment her name appeared on the assignment board, laughter broke out across the barracks. She won't last 3 steps, she freeze. She begged to be pulled out, but she said nothing, no protest, no fear. She simply tied her laces tighter, adjusted her worn-out gloves, and walked toward the field as though it was calling her. Now, as she stood at its edge, the sun climbing behind her like a spotlight, every soldier who doubted her felt a sudden twist of unease. There was something different about her today, something sharper, something unshakable. She didn't hesitate, didn't glance back, didn't wait for permission. She crossed the boundary with a quiet confidence that made the commander's breath catch, because this wasn't just a test for her. This was the moment the world would learn what she had always known, that true stealth isn't about hiding in the shadows. It's about walking through danger so silently that even death doesn't notice you. The briefing room buzzed with a low, nervous energy as engineers rolled out a faded map covered in red X's, each one representing a mine that could tear a vehicle apart, let alone a human. The air smelled like old metal and oil, the kind that clings to uniforms long after the work is done. The chief engineer adjusted his glasses and spoke with a grim seriousness that instantly silenced the room. This isn't just any minefield. It's a relic from the old conflict zone: pressure mines, seismic mines, and an unpredictable set of chain-reactive charges. One wrong step and the entire grid detonates. A few soldiers exchanged smirks, glancing toward the girl sitting quietly in the back. She didn't react, her eyes stayed locked on the map, absorbing every detail. The commander explained that this wasn't about bravery, it was about discipline and absolute control. The engineers warned that even experienced field operatives avoided this zone because the mines aged unpredictably, becoming more sensitive every year. But to the unit, the danger was almost secondary. Their focus was on her. They whispered jokes, calling her lightweight, asking if she even knew how to walk under pressure. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She simply inhaled, slow and calm, as though preparing her mind for something far bigger than a test. Long before she wore a uniform, her training ground was the remote mountain village where sound echoed through valleys like warnings. Her grandfather, a weathered tracker with eyes that saw stories and footprints, taught her that the earth speaks if you listen. She learned to step on frozen river surfaces without cracking them, distributing her weight so gently that even thin ice held her. In dense forests, she moved across carpets of dry leaves without crushing them, placing her feet with the precision of a painter touching canvas. When storms rolled through the mountains, she studied how the ground shifted, how vibrations traveled, how even a tiny stone could reveal what lay beneath. These lessons weren't just survival techniques, they shaped every part of her being. She became someone who measured the world by feel instead of noise, someone who sensed danger before seeing it. While other kids ran and stumbled through the wilderness, she slid between branches and rocks like she was part of the terrain itself. Her grandfather called her the Whisper, and now, years later, sitting among armored soldiers who underestimated her, she closed her eyes and remembered those mountains. She remembered the silence. She remembered her training. She remembered who she was before anyone doubted her. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked earth as she approached the boundary rope. Soldiers stood lined up, arms crossed, whispering predictions of her failure. The commander raised his hand, signaling the start, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Her first step landed with a softness that made no sound. It wasn't hesitation, it was awareness. She felt for the earth's response, sensed minor tremors beneath the dust, and adjusted her foot to the safest point. The soldiers watched in stunned silence as she took the next step, then another, moving with a fluid grace none of them had expected. At times, she paused mid-step, shifting her weight until the vibrations settled. Every inch of ground in front of her became a puzzle only she could read. Sweat formed on the brows of the watching engineers as they recognized how close she was to known pressure plates, sometimes mere centimeters away. Yet her movement was calm, almost rhythmic, like a dance choreographed by instinct. She didn't rush, didn't falter. It felt like she belonged in that deadly silence, walking where metal teeth waited to swallow her whole. The farther she went, the quieter the crowd grew, fear turning into awe. Halfway through the minefield, a distant rumbling rolled across the valley like thunder. At first, the soldiers thought it was incoming artillery or training rounds from another unit. But the engineers' faces drained of color, they knew seismic minds could misinterpret strong vibrations as footsteps. The slightest tremble could detonate several charges at once. Dust lifted off the ground in tiny clouds, and the metal-rimmed pressure plates shifted subtly under the surface. She felt it too, the earth beneath her feet pulsed like a heartbeat out of rhythm. She froze not in fear, but in calculation. Closing her eyes, she listened the way she had in the mountains, letting the vibrations inform her. Instead of moving forward, she slowly bent her knees, lowering her center of gravity, making herself part of the ground rather than a weight on top of it. She waited until the rumbling faded, until the tremors settled into stillness. Then she resumed her path, readjusting each step with renewed precision. The commander watched with clenched fists, knowing one wrong movement would send a shockwave through the entire field. Engineers whispered updates, calling out shifting plates and unstable soils, but she didn't need their warnings. Her senses were sharper than any instrument. She wasn't just avoiding danger now, she was navigating a living, breathing battlefield. As she neared the final zone, the tension around the observation post became unbearable. The last 10 steps were the most unpredictable. The engineers had marked them as black zone areas where mines were buried irregularly, overlapping one another. One soldier muttered, "This is where she breaks," but she didn't. Her breathing slowed, shoulders relaxed, and her gaze sharpened into a level of focus that sent chills through the unit. A faint gust of wind blew across the ground, gently lifting a layer of loose ash. In that brief moment, she saw a cluster mine half hidden beneath the dust. Most would have missed it. She didn't. Raising her foot, she shifted her angle, letting the breeze guide her as she sidestepped with millimeter perfection. She tested the soil with the edge of her boot, pressing so lightly it barely left an imprint. 1 step, 2, 9 steps left. Every movement felt like a negotiation with death. She leaned into balance, letting her arms float slightly outward, adjusting to the unstable terrain. Soldiers barely breathed, afraid even sound would break her concentration. When she reached the final step, she paused one last time, grounding herself before crossing the boundary line. And when her boot touched safe earth, the silence shattered into an explosion of cheers. When she stepped out of the minefield, dust clinging to her boots and sweat lining her forehead, the entire unit erupted into stunned silence, not ridicule, not disbelief, but something far heavier, respect. The soldiers who had mocked her now avoided her eyes, their earlier arrogance replaced with quiet shame. She didn't gloat, she didn't even smile. She simply stood tall, steady, breathing normally as though she had just taken a morning walk instead of crossing a death trap. The commander approached her slowly, his expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate care, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal patch, one reserved for operatives capable of precision-level stealth under extreme threat. "You're not just stealth," he said softly, pinning it onto her uniform. "You're a ghost." The words echoed through the ranks, shifting every former doubt into admiration. From that moment on, her reputation spread like wildfire across the base. She became the one soldiers sought for advice, the one commanders trusted with silent missions, the one whose footsteps could pass through danger unnoticed. The minefield test had started as a joke at her expense but ended as a legend. And legends, once proven, are never doubted again. The sun dipped lower as she walked away from the minefield, her silhouette cutting through the drifting dust like a quiet promise. The cheers had faded, the crowd had dispersed, but she didn't need applause. She moved with the same calm certainty she carried into the field, each step light, deliberate, almost weightless. Behind her, the deadly grid of explosives lay untouched, as if even the mines themselves had chosen not to challenge her. Soldiers who once doubted her now watched from a distance, unsure whether to congratulate her or simply admire the impossible thing they had witnessed. The commander stood at the edge of the field, arms crossed, eyes following her with a mixture of pride and awe, knowing he had just seen something that would be retold for years. As she stepped beyond the last shadow of danger, a soft breeze carried the dust off her boots, leaving her path clean, unmarked, like she had walked through death and left no trace. A narrator's voice would whisper the truth they had all learned too late. Some warriors crush obstacles with strength, others charge through fire with fearlessness. But the rarest walk through danger so silently that even the battlefield forgets to harm them. She didn't just survive the minefield. She rewrote what survival looked like.